No prime ministers or presidents were harmed in the making of this video, just them behaving badly and spending money on things they shouldn't. Terms and conditions apply.
If I say the words to you, pay driver, something about those words that make a lot of F1 fans quite uneasy. But why does it have that effect on people? To the extent, if we're being honest with ourselves, where they're not really given the same level of approval and respect in a lot of examples.
You know he's a fierce...
Especially compared to a driver that has made it into the sport based on his pure talent. Did I say not given the same level of respect? Well, when you look a little bit deeper into the record book, I found quite a few drivers that went on to become the most loved and even considered some of the best F1 drivers in the history of the sport. Imagine making it into one of the hardest sports to get into, a sport that you've dreamt about getting into your whole life, and just to be labelled another pay driver. If you're fast enough to be competitive and bring money to the table, then why not allow people to race? Which drivers have been able to enter the sport under the pay driver title and let their talent shine through so strongly that we've forgotten about how they started? Welcome to the F1 house. My name is Saki. Keep watching to find out 5 drivers that started off as pay drivers and end up as some of the most successful ever. Now I hope you really learned something from this video, because I certainly enjoyed researching it and making it. I'm going to ask you for one big favour. If you could give it a like, subscribe and hit that notification bell, I really appreciate it. It really helps get the video out to more people. We're gonna go for 30,000 likes, because that's how much one driver took out a loan for just to get into F1. So 30,000 likes and my life will be fulfilled. I don't want to assume that everyone knows what a pay driver is, so let's run through that super quickly. A pay driver isn't a driver that turns up to the track like go-karting, paying for time slots. No, don't be silly. A pay driver is someone that works for a professional motorsports team who actually brings funding or sponsorship to the team instead of being paid by them. And they are a common thing in most motorsport categories. So let's get going with this list of drivers. Jumping straight in at number 5, we have Mr. Aussie Grit, aka Mark Webber, a driver who never actually won a world championship, but was a driver at one of the most dominant teams in the history of the sport. If you don't know what I'm talking about already, he was the teammate of Sebastian Vettel from 2009 to 2013, where Vettel won 4 world titles. But what did he do before his relative success? To understand that, we need to go back in time. We have to look into his early days with Arrow's F1 team and Benetton, where he started off as the test driver. He finally got his breakthrough with Minardi in 2002, mainly because of the assistance from Flavio Briatore and his personal sponsors from Australia, which were Foster's and Telstra. How successful was Mark Webber? In those years where Sebastian Vettel won his 4 world championships, Mark Webber finished 3rd on 3 occasions and 6th on 1 occasion, which is pretty decent. For me, he should be considered as a successful F1 driver, recording 9 wins, 42 podiums, 13 pole positions in 215 starts. Number 4, the late Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda's name has become known as one of the greatest F1 drivers ever to grace the sport. He has potentially one of the greatest sporting comebacks when he battled in the 1976 championship, even after sustaining near fatal injuries during a race. It wasn't always the case though that his talent was clearly obvious before he became an icon in the sport. So let's roll back to the 1970s, where Niki Lauda was actually struggling to get into F1, so he took it upon himself to take out a £30,000 bank loan to buy his way into an F1 team, and that team's name was March. To keep on being aggressive and take the next steps, he then took out another loan to join the BRM F1 team. It was here where he partnered with Clay Regazzoni. Regazzoni would later join Ferrari and end up taking Lauda with him. How successful was Lauda? Overall, his record was extremely impressive, especially when you look at the comeback that he made. He achieved a whopping 3 world championships, recording 25 wins, 54 podiums, 24 pole positions in 171 starts. With these stats, he can easily say the investment was worth it and he's a true great. Number 3, this spot goes probably one of the most polarizing characters to enter the sport. The man who toppled the most successful F1 driver ever from his podium. This is Fernando Alonso, who came up through the ranks being known for his impeccable racecraft. He still, however, had to get financial assistance to get into F1, despite having a strong junior career. Flavio Briatore provided financial backing to Alonso, allowing him to get a seat with Minardi. They weren't competitive, but it allowed him to get his foot in the door and achieve some great things later on down the line. How successful was Alonso? His record is extremely impressive, and he'll go down as one of the most talented F1 drivers ever, achieving 2 world championships, recording 32 wins, 97 podiums, 22 pole positions in 311 starts. A stat that really surprised me is Alonso only achieved 22 career pole positions, 2 first place in the world championships, 3 second places and 1 third place throughout his career. What is certain is that Alonso's career didn't hit the heights that his talents deserve because of his decision making. 2 world championships is better than nothing though. Next up, number 2. This goes to another great in F1, probably the very first great of F1. That is, of course, Juan Manuel Fangio. He set records that weren't broken for decades, winning 5 championships in the process. Not only did he do this in the most dangerous period of the sport, but he did it with 4 different teams. With Fangio, one fact that often goes unnoticed was the funding and support that he got that came from Juan, who at the time was the president of Argentina. Imagine Boris Johnson coming out publicly and paying for George Russell to go racing because he liked F1 and believed in the boy's talent. He, as a huge sports fan, really wanted to boost the reputation of Argentina internationally, so all in all, not a bad investment. How successful was Fangio? Overall, his record is pretty immaculate and he is a true GOAT contender, achieving a whopping 5 world championships, recording 24 wins, 35 podiums, and 29 pole positions in 52 starts. And last up, coming in at number 1, the man who's statistically the greatest driver ever, Michael Schumacher, at the end of his career amassed 7 world titles with 2 different teams, Benetton and of course Ferrari. But he probably has the most controversial moments out of all F1 drivers, let alone F1 drivers with a championship under their belt. But yep, there is another but. A lot of people don't actually know about the fact that he was associated with Mercedes, who in the early 90s were planning to get back into F1 and they were looking to Michael Schumacher to be their top driver. They were so impressed with his performances in sports car races, they stumped up a whopping $150,000 to Jordan to drive in the Jordan seat midway through the 1991 season. But before his arrival in F1, he had been associated with Mercedes, who in the early 1990s were intending to re-enter F1 as a manufacturer and were nurturing Schumacher as a driver. With impressive performances in the sports car races, he had already made an impression upon the German manufacturer, and when the seat with Jordan became available midway through the 1991 season, the brand provided $150,000 to the team in order to sign Schumacher. And the rest, as you know, is history, because his career turned out to be a bit of a movie. So get your popcorn out. For those of you that don't know how successful Michael Schumacher was, overall his career is almost untouchable, achieving an eye-watering 7 world championships, recording 91 wins, 155 podiums, 68 pole positions in 306 starts. Looking at these 5 drivers that started off as pay drivers, I think it's fair to say that pay drivers are pretty important to the sport. I'm going to be proper geeky here and say that I really enjoyed making this video and researching it, because it was another chance for me to look at the history of F1 and get those little bits of information that aren't widely remembered. And that just about finishes off the video, which I hope you've enjoyed. Until next time, everyone, like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you get all my latest videos.